So today I want to share with you sections of a book I was reading, because this week we commemorate, or should be commemorating, should be remembering Michael Servetus. I'll call him by his name, Spanish name, Miguel Servet. So this is sections of a book called Studies in Church History. This is fact, this is history. This is not fantasy, this happened. Calvin's hatred for Servetus goes back to 1546, when Calvin wrote to a colleague. Calvin said, if Servetus ever comes to Geneva, he will not leave it alive. Later, his spies forwarded the Catholic authorities in France, where Servet had been hiding for almost 2 decades, by the way, under a pseudonym. So he sent the Catholics, so this is a Protestant, sent the Catholics advance sheets of Servet's last book called The Restoration of Christianity, because Servet had sent him an advance copy in a friendly gesture to continue debate and dialogue on these matters. At once, a Catholic denunciation of the author was publicly announced. Servet was eventually arrested in France because of that, because of what Calvin did, but escaped and fled to Geneva, where he naturally expected to find safety among his Protestant brethren. On August 13, 1553, he was once again arrested in Geneva by order of Calvin and held for trial as a heretic. After 5 weeks in prison, Servet wrote to the Council of Geneva from his dungeon prison, quote, "Vermin are eating me alive. My underclothing is in tatters, and I have not even a shirt for a change." The magistrates in Geneva were prepared to send him some sheets and a shirt, but Calvin objected. On October 26, 3 weeks later, so he was in a dungeon prison for almost, 2 months or so, maybe 3, the unfortunate, says Parsons, was notified that he had been condemned to death by slow fire. Calvin afterward commented on the horror with which Servet heard this sentence, quote, "Let not the rest of the lowlifes, the villains, take pride in the stubbornness of their hero as though it were the faithfulness of a martyr. When he heard his fate," Calvin says, "he manifested the stupidity of a brute. Now his eyes were fixed like those of a fool, and he drew deep sighs. Then he would howl like a madman. He never ceased to bellow after the fashion of the Spaniards. 'Mercy, mercy,' he cried." The next day, October 27, 1553, Servet was led to the stake. The green faggots showed him that his death was to be a lingering one. "The axe," he cried, "the axe! Not fire, lest I lose my soul in despair. If I have sinned, it was through ignorance," he said, but made no retraction. From a neighboring window, Calvin coolly gazed on the spectacle. When the gentle, quote-unquote, Melanchthon, the intellectual leader of the Lutheran Reformation, heard of this event, he wrote to Calvin, quote, "By putting Servetus to death, the magistracy of the Republic of Geneva gave a pious and memorable example to all posterity. I'm entirely of your opinion, and I hold for certain that the matter having been conducted according to law, your magistrates acted justly in putting the blasphemer to death." End quote. Later, Calvin himself justified his course in the matter by publishing an exposition of the errors of Servetus, quote, "together with a defense of the proposition that heretics are to be put to death," end quote. Just before he died, Calvin wrote to the officials in Spain, where Servet was born. This was one of the last letters by Calvin. Quote, "Take good care to rid the land of these despicable rascals who excite the people against us, Such monsters should be executed like Miguel Servet, the Spaniard. Nevertheless, when Calvin was younger, a zealous Protestant of the Catholic Church, he wrote, "It's lamentable indeed that the state of the papal church, when it can be upheld only by violence." So I hope you can educate yourself more on this sad episode of our faith, because Servetus was one of us. He was zealous anti-Trinitarian, and so we remember him this week.